On the night of my birthday, instead of love and a cake, my parents gave me the cruelest gift. They kicked me out. What happened next turned into the most heartbreaking revenge story you'll ever hear. Birthdays are supposed to be special. They're supposed to be the one day of the year when you feel seen, celebrated, loved. But on the morning of my 17th birthday, I woke up to silence. Not the warm silence of a sleeping household, but the cold, empty kind. The kind that made you wonder if you even existed. I lay in bed for a few minutes staring at the ceiling, listening for footsteps, laughter, even a whispered, "Happy birthday." Nothing came. My chest felt heavy, but I told myself maybe they were planning a surprise. Maybe, just maybe, they hadn't forgotten me. I forced myself up, smoothed down my hair, and walked down the stairs with the smallest spark of hope in my chest. But as soon as I reached the kitchen, that spark was crushed. The table was set beautifully, balloons, cake, gifts, the whole scene. But none of it was for me. In bold, glittering letters strung across the living room wall, the banner read, "Happy birthday, Emily." My younger sister. Not me. Emily was laughing, blowing out candles, tearing into presents while my parents beamed at her as though she were the only child they had ever loved. I froze in the doorway, waiting for someone to notice me, waiting for my mother to turn around and smile, or for my father to pat my shoulder and say, "And happy birthday to you too." But no one did. Minutes passed. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat growing until it hurt to breathe. Finally, I whispered, It's my birthday too." The room fell quiet. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd realize what they had done. But then my mother looked at me with that familiar coldness, the one that always cut deeper than any words. "Don't start," she said flatly. "Today is Emily's day. Don't ruin it." My father didn't even look at me. He just kept pouring drinks for the guests, laughing as though I wasn't standing there, breaking apart. Emily smirked, her mouth still smeared with chocolate cake. "You're so dramatic," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "It's not like you even matter." Her friends laughed. And in that moment, I realized I was invisible, not just today, not just on my birthday, but always. I ran to my room, slammed the door, and pressed my back against it as tears spilled down my face. I could still hear their laughter echoing from downstairs. My parents, my sister, everyone celebrating while I sat alone on the floor, hugging my knees to my chest. Hours passed like that, until there was a knock on the door. For the briefest moment, hope flickered again. Maybe they'd come to apologize. Maybe they'd remembered. But it wasn't an apology waiting on the other side. It was my mother. Her face was tight, her eyes filled with irritation, not remorse. "We need to talk," she said curtly. She didn't wait for me to answer. She walked into the room, glanced around with disgust at the messy bed, the notebooks scattered across the desk. Then she dropped a small, worn-out suitcase at my feet. "Pack your things," she said. I stared at her, confused. "What? Why?" "You're 17 now," she said, as though that explained everything. "You're old enough. We can't keep supporting you when you do nothing but mope and complain. Emily has a future. You're just taking up space." Her words hit harder than any slap. I stumbled back, shaking my head. "But I'm still in school. I don't even have a job yet. Where am I supposed to go?" She folded her arms. "That's not our problem. You're old enough to figure it out. Don't come crying back when things get hard. Consider this motivation." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving me with the suitcase, the sound of Emily's laughter still drifting up from downstairs. On the day I should have felt most loved, most celebrated, my parents disowned me. They didn't just forget my birthday. They threw me out of their lives. That night, I packed in silence. A few clothes, a notebook, some pens, and the tiniest shred of dignity I had left. When I walked out the door, no one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. No one cared. I stepped into the cold night, the rain beginning to fall in thin, icy sheets. And as the house disappeared behind me, I realized something that shattered my heart even more than their words. I wasn't leaving home, because home had never truly existed for me. That was the night everything changed, the night my heart cracked open, the night I stopped being their child, and the night I vowed, silently through clenched teeth and tears, that one day they would regret ever letting me go. The rain didn't stop that night. It came down harder and harder, soaking through my thin jacket, plastering my hair to my face as I walked aimlessly down the dark streets. I had nowhere to go, no plan, just a suitcase that felt heavier with every step and a heart that felt like it was splitting in two. Cars passed by, their headlights cutting through the rain, but none of them slowed. No one looked twice at the soaked teenager dragging a suitcase through the night. I was invisible here, too. At some point, my legs gave up. I collapsed on a bench at the edge of a park, my body trembling from the cold. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since morning. But hunger was the least of my problems. I opened my suitcase, searching for something, anything, that might bring comfort. But all I saw were clothes and my old notebook. I pulled it out, running my fingers over the worn leather cover. It had always been my safe place, the only place where I could pour out feelings that no one else cared about. That night, I wrote, "Happy birthday to me, 17 years old, thrown away like garbage. If they don't want me, maybe the world doesn't either." Tears splattered the page, smearing the ink, but I didn't bother to wipe them away. I curled up on the bench, clutching the notebook to my chest, and prayed the night would pass quickly. It didn't. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the splash of rain, the footsteps of strangers, kept me awake. Fear gnawed at me, fear of being seen, fear of being hurt, fear of being forgotten forever. When dawn finally came, it wasn't a relief. It just meant another day I had to survive. I wandered through the city the next morning, dragging my suitcase behind me like a burden I couldn't put down. My clothes clung damp and cold to my skin. I checked my phone. No messages. Not from my mother, not from my father, not even from Emily. They had erased me, as if I had never existed. At one point, hunger became unbearable. I sat outside a bakery, watching as warm, golden loaves were pulled from the oven, the smell twisting my stomach in knots. People walked past me, clutching bags filled with food, laughter on their lips, while I sat there with nothing. I wanted to scream, to beg, but pride sealed my mouth shut. I refused to let the world see me break more than I already had. Eventually, I forced myself up and walked to the library. It was warm there, quiet. No one asked questions. I hid between the shelves, pretending to read while I tried to dry my clothes and rest my eyes. And yet, even surrounded by books, I couldn't escape the voice in my head. They didn't want you. You're worthless. You're alone. That night, I returned to the park. Another bench. Another sleepless night. Day after day blurred together like that. Cold mornings, empty afternoons, lonely nights. I learned to ration what little money I had saved from odd chores and gifts from distant relatives. I bought cheap sandwiches, water bottles, anything to keep my body moving. But no matter how much I tried to stay strong, my heart kept breaking. Because no matter how much I told myself I was fine, I wasn't. I wanted someone to care. I wanted a hand on my shoulder, a voice saying, "You're not alone." But the only voice I had was my own. That evening, as the sun set behind the buildings, I caught sight of a family walking together, a mother, a father, 2 children. They were laughing, holding hands, swinging their youngest between them as she squealed with joy. I stopped in my tracks, staring until they disappeared down the street. And for the first time in days, I let myself sob openly, not caring who saw, because that was what I had always wanted, Not money, not gifts, just love. But for me, love had always been conditional, something I had to earn, prove, fight for. And even then, it was never enough. By the end of the first week, I wasn't just tired, I was breaking. Sleep deprivation blurred my thoughts. Hunger gnawed constantly. My body ached from cold nights on hard benches. And worst of all, I started to believe the lies they told me. Maybe I was nothing. Maybe I really didn't matter. Maybe the world would be better if I disappeared. One night, I stood at the edge of a bridge, staring down at the black water below. The city lights reflected off its surface, shimmering like broken glass. I imagined stepping forward. I imagined the silence that would follow. No more pain, no more loneliness, just nothing. And for a terrifying moment, I wanted it. But then, a voice broke through, not from the water, not from the wind, but from deep inside me. It was small, fragile, but it said, "Not like this. Don't let them win." I stumbled back, shaking, tears streaming down my face. I collapsed onto the pavement, sobbing until my chest hurt. I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. I wanted to prove that I wasn't worthless, that I was more than what they had called me. And that night, under the stars, I made a promise to myself. If they didn't want me, I would build a life without them. If they thought I was weak, I would show them strength. If they erased me, I would write myself back into existence. The first night alone had nearly destroyed me, but it had also lit a spark of survival, a spark of defiance, a spark of revenge. And though I didn't know how yet, I swore that someday my parents would feel the same helplessness, the same pain, the same emptiness they had forced upon me. I didn't just want to survive. I wanted them to remember the child they had thrown away, and I wanted them to regret it. The days bled together. Each sunrise was just another reminder that I had no one. Each night was just another battle to stay alive. But in that endless cycle of survival, something inside me began to shift. It started small, a thought, a whisper, a single ember buried under all the pain. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself I needed to focus on food, on warmth, on finding a place to sleep. Revenge was just a fantasy, something out of reach for someone like me. But the ember refused to die. It grew hotter each day until it was all I could think about. In one morning, I sat in the corner of the library, flipping through an old notebook I had found in the free pile. My hands trembled as I turned the pages. It wasn't the content that caught me. It was the empty margins, the blank space waiting to be filled. I pulled out a pen and wrote one sentence. "They threw me away, but I'll make them regret it." I stared at the words, my chest heaving, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than sorrow. I felt power. My parents had always underestimated me. They saw me as a burden, someone to control, someone to silence. They thought by throwing me out, they had ended my story. But they were wrong. They hadn't ended it. They had started it. And deep inside, I knew the best revenge wasn't violence. It wasn't screaming at their door, demanding answers. No, the best revenge was control, to take away the very thing they valued most. And for my parents, that was money, their perfect, polished image, their status, their wealth. They worshipped it more than they had ever cared about me. And if I could touch it, if I could make it crumble, then maybe they would finally feel the same emptiness they had left me with. Of course, I didn't know how. Not yet. I had no resources, no allies, no plan. But I had something just as dangerous: knowledge. I had grown up in that house, hadn't I? I had seen the password scribbled on sticky notes my dad left near his desk. I had watched my mom type her banking details, her manicured nails clacking against the keys. I had been invisible in that house, but invisibility has its perks. You see everything when no one bothers to look at you. And suddenly, the memories came rushing back. Little details I had ignored, numbers, patterns, habits, pieces of a puzzle I hadn't realized I was collecting all along. That night, back on my bench, I took out my notebook again. I sketched everything I remembered. The logins, the cards, the bank names, the clues. At first, it felt ridiculous. What could a homeless teenager possibly do against two adults with jobs, power, connections? But the more I wrote, the clearer it became. They weren't invincible. They weren't untouchable. And if I played it right, I could bring their perfect little empire crashing down. For days, I obsessed. I sat in the library using the free computers, researching how banks worked, how accounts could be locked, how money flowed. I wasn't stupid. I knew I couldn't just hack my way in like in the movies, but freezing accounts, locking cards, forcing them into chaos, that wasn't impossible. It was within reach. The thought electrified me. I wasn't powerless anymore. But revenge wasn't the only thing that drove me. Somewhere deep down, I wanted them to see me, to finally understand what they had done, to feel, if only for a second, the same helplessness, the same fear, the same despair that had become my daily reality. They had laughed on my birthday, sipping wine as they pushed me out the door. But I wanted the day to come when they would cry, when they would beg for answers they couldn't find, when they would look at each other and realize, this is because of her. And maybe then, just maybe, they'd remember the daughter they had erased. The spark of revenge became my lifeline. Every time I shivered in the cold, I thought of their warm house. Every time my stomach ached from hunger, I thought of their lavish dinners. Every time I felt small, invisible, worthless, I thought of the moment they would crumble. And suddenly, surviving wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the promise that I would rise, the promise that they would fall. One evening, as I scribbled plans into my notebook, a realization struck me. I didn't have to be strong forever. I just had to be strong long enough to learn, long enough to prepare, long enough to strike when they least expected it. It wasn't about rushing, it was about patience, like a hunter waiting in the shadows, like a storm gathering quietly unnoticed until the sky split open and everything drowned. That would be me, their storm. I closed the notebook, hugging it to my chest. The rain tapped against the windows of the library, and for the first time, I smiled. It wasn't over. It had only just begun. That was the night I stopped being a victim. That was the night the spark became a flame. And that was the night I swore. I will freeze their world. I will watch their empire collapse. And when it does, they'll finally know what it feels like to lose everything. The spark of revenge was alive now. It warmed me on nights when the wind cut through my thin jacket. It whispered to me when I wanted to give up. But a spark on its own wasn't enough. If I wanted to change anything, I needed strength. I needed proof that I wasn't powerless. And slowly, I began to find it. Then one night, I opened my old notebook and wrote at the very top, how to break them. Piece by piece, I filled it with memories, bank names, passwords I had once seen, little habits they thought I never noticed. The puzzle was coming together, and for the first time, I felt the balance shift. They weren't gods anymore. They were human, predictable, vulnerable. Every small victory gave me strength. I tested myself, surviving with almost no food, studying for hours without rest, walking past my old house without breaking down. Every success reminded me I was no longer the discarded daughter. I was becoming someone stronger, someone dangerous. Din sa ways. The community center, I discovered computers, free internet, quiet, a place to belong. I practiced in silence, testing systems, learning weaknesses, waiting for the right moment. Then one day, it happened. I typed. Steady hands, but a racing heart. Access denied. Again, until suddenly the screen flashed. This account has been temporarily locked for security reasons. I froze. My breath caught. It worked. For the first time, I had touched their world. I had shaken it, and the power I felt, it was intoxicating. Didn't cry myself to sleep. I lay awake, staring at the stars, whispering to myself, they think you're weak. They think you're nothing. But soon, they'll know the truth. The girl they had abandoned was gone, and in her place stood someone they would never see coming. The turning point came faster than I expected. My small tests had worked, but now it was time to strike. I sat at the community center staring at the computer screen. My hands hovered above the keyboard, trembling. This wasn't just practice anymore. This was real. I typed slowly, carefully, entering everything I remembered. Names, numbers, dates they never thought I paid attention to. And then, with one final keystroke, I pressed enter. The screen flickered. A cold message appeared. This account has been frozen due to suspicious activity. Meaning for a moment the air left my lungs. I clutched the table, shaking. Had I just actually done it? I pictured my father sitting at his desk trying to log in, frowning as the screen rejected him. I imagined my mother's credit card being declined at the grocery store, their smug faces twisting with confusion. For the first time, they weren't untouchable. For the first time, I held the power. Menendran, as the city lights glowed far away, I whispered to myself, they took everything from me. Now it's my turn. The hunger, the cold, the loneliness, it all felt different now, because I knew their perfect little world was starting to crack, and I was the one holding the hammer. The fallout began quietly. At first, I thought maybe nothing had happened, but then the stories reached me. My father's company card declined in front of his colleagues. My mother, standing at the register, groceries bagged and ready, only to be told, "Sorry, ma'am, payment failed." Her cheeks burning, her voice shaking. And Emily, sweet, perfect Emily, crying when her friends couldn't buy concert tickets with the card my parents had promised her, her little kingdom of privilege collapsing in front of everyone. So for a long time, I had imagined this moment. I thought I would laugh. I thought I would celebrate. But when I finally saw them broken, a different feeling hit me. It wasn't joy. It was sorrow. Because deep down, a part of me still wanted them to love me. Still wanted to hear, just once, "We're sorry. We should have chosen you too." But instead, what I saw was panic, anger, fear, not love. I watched them scramble, running from bank to bank, their voices sharp and desperate. And I realized something. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. For years, they controlled me with silence, with cruelty, with rejection. But now, for the first time, they were powerless. And I, the daughter they abandoned, I was the one who held their fate in my hands. That night, sitting alone on the cold floor of my tiny rented room, I cried. Not because I regretted what I'd done, but because I knew, no matter how much they suffered, it would never undo what they did to me. It would never give me back the childhood I lost. And yet, through the tears, I whispered to myself, they will remember me now. Not as a shadow, not as a mistake, but as the storm they never saw coming. Days turned into weeks, and slowly I watched their perfect world fall apart. The house that once felt untouchable, sold. The cars that gleamed in the driveway, gone. The family vacations, the shopping trips, the smug smiles, they vanished piece by piece like sand slipping through their fingers. I thought it would heal me. I thought their collapse would finally fill the hole in my heart. But late at night, when everything was quiet, the truth echoed inside me. No amount of revenge could give me back the birthday they ruined. No amount of punishment could replace the love I never received. And that was the cruelest part. Because deep down, I didn't just want to see them fall. I wanted them to choose me, to look me in the eye and say, "You were always enough." But that day never came. So I stood alone, stronger now, scarred but alive. And I made myself a promise. I would never become like them. I would never measure a child's worth by money or appearances or convenience. If I ever had a family of my own, they would know love first, before anything else. Because the pain they gave me, it would end with me. I closed the chapter of my past. I realized something. Yes, I had broken their lives, but in doing so, I had built my own strength. And maybe that was the real revenge. Not watching their world collapse, but proving to myself that I could rise from the ashes of what they left me in. This is not just the story of how they lost everything. It's the story of how I found myself.